Greetings, Culturians, and welcome back. We have had a very surprising and resilient weekend at the box office. Well, not we per se, but Superman has. And it looks like it's very good. In fact, the overall performance this weekend at the box office was a number that we don't get to see as consistently as we need to. Over $135 million for all performers. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Let's get to it. Here we go. Now, before we begin, just a quick reminder, please double check you're still subscribed to the channel. Right down there, make sure everything's turned on. You've turned on the notification bell. Everything is all notifications, so you don't miss anything, because I have lots of entertainment and information to hand out. And we're going to start right now with Deadline Story. Superman's $57 million second weekend propels Warner Brothers to the top of year-to-date studio market share. $1.32 billion. Now, this is going to be short-lived. I mean, Anthony knows that, and Deadline knows that, and Variety knows that, and we're going to talk about Nancy's story here in a couple of minutes, and she knows that. But what we do know is that when Fantastic Four shows up next weekend, then we'll actually have a bit of a battle, at least headed into the end of the year, where Disney will definitely take definitive control of the overall box office. But Warner's has a lot to crow about as we look forward to it remaining number one in the box office this weekend with a $57 million figure. Well, we also had some other things show up, which includes I Know What You Did Last Summer, which word of mouth says pretty good, and Smurfs, which is a complete failure, exactly the kind of thing that you and I would have expected. In fact, at a global international earnings of $31 million, which I believe may be soft, we'll have to see if that thing even charts next weekend, let alone finishes the month in a position that it could be proud of. And despite the fact that Superman had these three new releases coming in to compete with Smurfs, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and the terrible and far-fetched and completely bonkers Eddington, it still whooped them all. $57.3 million from 4,774 venues. It added over 100 venues, I believe, in the weekend. It only had a 54% standard decline, which is pretty much about what you're going to see from superhero films right now, and maybe all films going forward. That's a conversation for another video coming up with Kevin Apollo, maybe later today or tomorrow. But $125 million debut plus the $57.5 million plus everything it's earned in between gives it over $406 million globally. Huge numbers, good numbers, not the biggest numbers, but this is a solid performance for a superhero film that didn't have a lot to look forward to because the international box office was doing so, well, poorly, for lack of a better way to describe it. The 54% second weekend fall is something ComScore analyst Paul de Garabedian has said is, well, indicative of a marketplace that's embracing the film, even if the international market isn't. And with the only real competition left in the summer entering the marketplace this coming weekend, on Thursday and Friday exactly, we'll have Fantastic Four, Superman, and, of course, Jurassic World all competing together and doing quite a fine job of showing what the potential of every other month should have been, because we had a very disappointing June and a not terribly exciting August on the horizon. They need to really revisit how they window films so that they can all be more successful and come in big clusters so we get back to where we're supposed to be. Not only $135 million, which is what, again, we got this weekend in the entirety. And just so I can rub more salt in Paramount's wounds, we're going to take a look at Paramount's Smurfs, which opened in fourth place. That's not where they were hoping for. An $11 million earnings, which is still below the $13 million I saw on the top end, and only 3,500 venues, which means nobody went to see this movie. It was a $58 million budgeted musical that we know they shot over just slightly with some of the people that they brought in to follow up and do a few other voices. The animated adventures got $25 million from an international box office, which puts it at $36 million, and I don't think it's going to bounce much higher. As a matter of fact, this thing will be lucky if it doesn't fall off 60 or 70% next weekend, and it'll be even luckier if it's able to replace its projected budget and ad spend with what some people call profit. Yeah, that's not happening. And Eddington opened to a complete calamity. It's either feast or famine if you're A24, and this time you might go starving on a $4.2 million earn in 2,100 venues. Joaquin Phoenix and Peepaw Energy Pedro just could not make this film break the bank. Film is not just polarizing, it has gotten a C+ grade on CinemaScore, which means it's absolutely atrocious and uninteresting, and many other words I heard them use on Friday Night Tights last weekend. But to be fair, the international box office is where the story really finds its feet. You see, Superman at $407 million global isn't quite what we wanted it to be, but you can lay the blame at the international cinemas because they just didn't show up for this movie. Jurassic World is at $648 million, trying to crawl its way to $700, which I imagine will be very near where it stops, and it will fulfill the prophecy of falling down $300 million from the previous performance, which is a pattern that we've gotten ever since we got into the Dominions and these worlds that seem to hold less and less interest for fewer and fewer in the audience over, well, the decades they've been going on now. F1 is racing towards $500 million worldwide, and that is a big performer in the international audience, so obviously there are still people going to movies, at least in foreign countries, that is. So Demon Slayer did pretty well for its limited release, and I would say Nancy had quite the weekend, because she got to see some real growth in some areas I wasn't expecting. The only thing that's actually of any significance is the fact that Jurassic World Rebirth actually found its way into 4th place overall for this year's box office performance from the beginning of the year. It's behind Kneesaw 2, Lilo and Stitch, and Minecraft. And there's a decent chance that when it does get near 700 million, it may trip over it. But international markets are being more and more fickle, as I mentioned a moment ago, as Jurassic World Rebirth dipped another 42% across those 82 international markets, matching or coming close to what we were doing here domestically as it starts to fall down. And I will tell you, I don't have high hopes for this going very much over 700 million, which will put it fiercely in the category of maybe made a profit. And finally, we get to the numbers, which lets us actually look at the real numbers, the things that can't lie to us or spin a fancy little story around at us. And you see that the domestic box office of $235 million is for real. In fact, that number will go up just a little bit as we settle out with the actual totals and not with the estimates. International box office is the same. Their estimates are up, but not as high as they need to be. And this points to a future problem that you need to pay attention to. We all do, because it looks like internationally numbers are slipping, and that has a lot to do with some political upheaval in all of those countries and some very poor financial management in all of those countries. But in the end, it's a lack of interest in this kind of escape, and I'm going to say it is either tied directly to the superhero genre, which we'll find out next weekend, or it's tied directly just to DC and Superman. And if that's the case, Warner Brothers has a lot of rehab work to do. At an admitted $225 million project or production budget when they first started, the number ticked up higher. But they also brought in some folks to contribute, some partners to the tune of $170 million, which reduced the cost of the film from the over $300 million spend to something a little bit more reasonable. You add into the fact that they had to spend about $100 million to advertise this particular film, you're looking at a final spend that they may overcome if they get to their target $700 million number, but only if it makes that magical 3 times legs number, though, well, I have higher hopes for it because it will be in the theaters long enough at that point to creep ever closer to the magic billion. We'll just have to see. And as you can see, according to the numbers, this falls right within the center of the funnel of the expected performance, which is kind of good news, especially after its second weekend. You see, with only a 54% fall off, as we mentioned before, this thing is likely to kick its earnings off here in the States a lot closer to 300 million when it finishes, which means that this film will get closer and closer to 300 million by the end of next next weekend, which should put it safely towards the goal of 700 million or more. The question is, at that point, how much of a dent can Fantastic Four do to it? Well, that's all going to depend on word of mouth, and I'm not hearing good things, but I've got another video coming up later in the week, leading into that talks specifically about the overly enthusiastic fake audience out there that seems to be loving this movie that nobody's seen and nobody's been able to report on because the embargo doesn't end until tonight. And that's an important piece of the puzzle that we need to really keep in mind. Rounding out with this week's top 5 in the box office, we have Superman with 57. We have Jurassic World Rebirth with 23,400,000 this last weekend. I Know What You Did Last Summer in third place at 13 million, which is, believe it or not, better than Smurfs in fourth place at 11 million. These are not good numbers. And finally, wrapping up the rear with some longevity is F1 the movie at 9.6 million for the weekend. Once again at 131 million plus with only 20 big wide releases in theaters. This is really not the kind of weekend that the summer box office needed, but it's better than nothing, and we've been there a few times in the last year. And that's it. Those are my thoughts for the box office weekend. What are yours? Did your favorite film show up somewhere in the top 5? If so, well, congratulations, because everybody below that didn't do very well. Were you keen on Superman? Did you go and see it this weekend, or did you seen it more than once? Have you seen Jurassic World Rebirth, or are you saving your pennies for next week's release of Fantastic Four: Final Steps? Film that basically will seal the fate of Phase 6 of Marvel. Again, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And double check while you're down there, you hit the thumbs up button and you're still subscribed. As always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya! Maybe at the movies.